A new Trump administration plan would raise the rent for people living in public housing. A proposal from the Department of Housing and Urban Development would impact 4.7 million families who use federal housing assistance. It would also triple rent for the poorest households and allow public housing agencies to impose work requirements on tenants. CBS News White House reporter Jacqueline Alemany joins me now. Jackie, what kind of changes would we see in the new plan?
There are a variety of changes that you will see in this new plan that Secretary Ben Carson revealed today. The top line being that the tax for those receiving federal housing assistance will increase from 30% on the adjusted income to 35% on the overall gross income. So that means that people who do have access to this program will no longer be able to write off any deductions, such as medical expenses or child care. So it's not just an additional rent that they're going to be paying, but they're also going to be losing access to that deduction. There also, as you mentioned, will be work requirements, which is especially concerning to some experts, as the nature of work for people, for low-income families, is often unpredictable. So if you have these lower-income families who all of a sudden have to report to their housing managers or to their landlords a consistent weekly job report, it's possible that many people will be losing access to housing that they shouldn't be losing access to. And then there is also a really big change, which is that the poorest of the poor, the lowest income families, their minimum rent will change from $50 to $150. And this was kind of an arbitrary change that Ben Carson announced on a conference call with White House reporters today. We're not quite sure how HUD got to that number. Lastly, HUD also was able to squeeze in certain sort of tricky language, which says that they will have the unlimited authority to raise the minimum rent for the poorest low-income families, which prior to that it was set at, again, at $50. And again, all of these changes will need congressional approval, but these are the changes that were proposed today.
Well, do we know, Jackie, why Secretary Carson wants to make these changes?
Well, on the conference call, he says that he wants to make these changes for transparency, simplification issues, that he wants to reform the system and just make it easier overall. But when pressed on details like, do you have proof that work requirements actually get people back to work? Do you have data behind these changes? Why are you making these changes? Carson was actually very vague. When he was specifically asked about evidence for work requirements, why he believes that they work and why he believes they should be implemented, he very vaguely said that he was in North Carolina last week speaking with a group and they had good things to say about it, and that his office could send us some data at a later time. But experts say that they believe, and experts, on housing and benefits and low-income issues, they believe that Carson and the administration are proposing these changes in order to pay for the massive tax cuts that the Trump administration just implemented.
So Congressional Black Caucus Chairman Cedric Richmond, a Democrat from Louisiana, responded to the proposal saying, quote, "It is ironic that a man who used taxpayer dollars to buy a $30,000 dining room table for the federal agency he leads wants to raise rent on poor people." What else, Jackie, are opponents of the plan saying?
Yeah, there are not many proponents of this plan, just many opponents. They are saying, they are picking apart this 22-page document. Most importantly, the top line being, again, this comes on the tails of a huge tax cut for the wealthy. Banks just saved $3.4 billion in the past quarter because of these tax cuts. And meanwhile, you have HUD trying to cut benefits for the neediest, the most destitute, the lowest income population. A lot of experts also say that the evidence is clear. If you want to encourage social mobility, the number one issue, the number one problem and barrier to social mobility is having access to housing. Mm-hmm. And so what this administration should be doing is actually, if anything, increasing access to housing. But this action is really in line with everything that the Trump administration has proposed so far. Director Mulvaney, in the last budget presentation, proposed cutting SNAP benefits, food stamps, and instead replacing it with a food box that would save millions of dollars, which opponents also came out against. But again, this administration has targeted the neediest, the poorest of the poor in order to make cuts rather than the wealthy.
All right, Jackie Alemany in Washington for us. Jackie, thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.